Hey everyone, Keith Rogers with DesktopLathes.com here. This time with a quick tutorial on drilling with the tailstock on the Taig Lathe, and a trick that I use for drilling to a specific depth. First, a big thanks to everyone who has provided feedback. I've received some great advice, and I've used it to improve this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments, or feel free to message me direct. And remember, subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. So in my previous video on facing and turning operations, I demonstrated the basics of how I perform those operations on the Taig Lathe. In this video, I'm going to do a similar demonstration on how to drill holes on center and to a specific depth. So let's get started. So I've got a 1-inch piece of bar stock, scrap loaded in the 3-jaw. For the purposes of this demonstration, let's say we need to drill a 3/8 inch hole, and we need to drill it to 1/2 inch depth in the center of the stock. So we've got our stock loaded, and some people might think that if we just load this 3/8 inch tool in there, we can drill the hole. And that may work, but most likely you'll run into trouble. Unfortunately, there's not enough power in a lathe this size to drive a 3/8 inch twist drill directly into this material. The other issue is if you start out by using a twist drill, you'll find that the bit will tend to walk or kind of wobble around and dance on the stock, and when it does get a good bite, it's most likely not going to be in the center of the stock. At some point it's going to bite off center, and then you'll have another problem. So what we do to prevent that is, instead of starting with a twist drill, we start with a center drill. The center drill has a lot more stiffness, and it won't walk or wobble, and it'll give us a good starter pilot hole. So let's load this number 2 center drill into the tailstock. We've got a Jacob's chuck loaded on the tailstock. Remove the tool post, and I'm going to set the depth stop so that I don't wind up crashing at any point my carriage into the jaws of the 3-jaw. Okay, so we're safely out of the way there, everything's clear. And we'll load the center drill in the Jacob's chuck. And the Taig has a ram style tailstock. So basically I can position the tailstock wherever I'd like and tighten it where it's convenient so that I've got good leverage. And I'm going to start the motor on the lowest speed and then just slowly press, and we'll start that pilot hole. Okay. So I'm adding quite a bit of pressure at this point, and you can see the center drill doesn't move at all. It just feeds directly into the stock. And that's good enough. Okay, so now when we use a twist drill, we're going to enter the stock, and it's not going to have a chance to walk around. Now I'm going to load the 1/8 inch twist drill into the tailstock. Or rather, into the Jacob's chuck. So now the question is, where do I place the tailstock? I can do like I did with the center drill and just locate it wherever it's convenient to get good leverage for drilling the hole. However, it's going to be difficult to estimate how deep I'm drilling the hole. In some cases that won't matter. Maybe we just need to go through the stock. For the purposes of this demonstration, let's say that we need to go a 1/2 inch deep. So what I'm going to do is a little trick that I use, where I use the carriage to locate the tailstock for this operation. the first thing I do is extend the ram to the full depth. So this would be where we would bottom out in the drilling operation. And now we adjust the tailstock to a point that's going to be a known distance from the actual stock. I've already got a small hole started, so it's difficult to precisely locate the tip of the drill bit on the plane or on the face of the stock. So what I'll do is use this rule, 6-inch rule, with a known thickness. I'll press it up against that. And then temporarily lock the tailstock in place. Okay, so now we've got the drill bit the thickness of this rule from the face of the stock. And the way this trick works is we're going to use this carriage to position the tailstock so that we get exactly the depth that we want. Okay, if we were to measure a 1/2 inch, we could position the carriage a 1/2 inch from the tailstock, lock the carriage in position, and then move the tailstock 1/2 inch forward. However, we use the 6-inch rule to space off of the stock so that we had a distance from the face. So what I do is measure the thickness of the rule, zero out the caliper, and now move to my 1/2 inch. And so we'll locate the carriage a 1/2 inch plus the thickness of this rule, which is the distance that the tip of this drill bit is from the face of the stock. We'll lock the carriage in place. And that gives me a position that I can slide the tailstock to. So I've pressed the tailstock up against the carriage, and I know that I'm now a 1/2 inch from bottoming out on this cotter pin. And so that's my trick for drilling to depth. So next, let's go ahead and drill that 1/2 inch depth. Start the motor, we'll add a little cutting oil. Always a good idea when drilling a hole in metal. And I don't have quite as good a leverage when I'm using this little trick, but it should work just fine. So as we're drilling the hole, the bits begin to build up. And on the smaller hole, it's not as big of a deal. But at some point, you want to go ahead and back off, clear those chips so that things don't jam up. And you can do that as often as you feel necessary. Okay, so we're about bottomed out on this cotter pin. That should be our 1/2 inch depth. And there we go. So at this point we've got an 1/8 inch hole drilled 1/2 inch deep into our stock. Next, we'll move up in size to a 1/4 inch bit. A little bit of cutting oil. Everything looks good. We'll start the motor. So now we're drilling a 1/4 inch hole. And one thing I forgot to mention, it's a good idea to adjust your tailstock, the clamp on the ram on the tailstock, so that it's not too loose and not too tight. If it's too tight, obviously you can't move it. If it's too loose, it gets a little sloppy. We don't want that. Okay, here we go. This is a much bigger hole. Now if I get in trouble, things jam up, I can quickly pull it out. It's one of the advantages of the ram tailstock versus a lead screw type tailstock where you're feeding the tailstock or feeding the bit into the hole. Taking quite a bit more material with this larger bit. Break the chips. Some nice chips coming off there. And there we are. So we bottomed down on the cotter pin once more. And now we've got a 1/4 inch hole drilled to a 1/2 inch depth. So next up, I'm going to drill an 11/32 hole, working our way up to that 3/8. All right, little cutting fluid, motor start, and we'll do it again. Quite a bit more chatter this time. I might be going a little too aggressive with the increase in diameter. I'm going to go ahead and press on. Worst thing that can happen is we can get the bit jammed in the part. There we go. Chatter's mostly gone now that we've got a good bite. And there's our full depth, bottom out on the cotter pin. So now we've got an 11/32 hole at a 1/2 inch depth. We're going for 3/8. And let's see if we can make it without having to stop somewhere in between with another bit. All right, a little cutting oil. Fire up the motor, and away we go. Alright, there's our first jam. So, as I mentioned before, this can happen. I might have been a little too aggressive on our increase in diameter. So I'm going to hand turn, not backwards, but forwards. And we'll see if can't go a little more slowly. Tighten up the ram just a touch. See if we can get away with going up to this 3/8 inch bit. There we go. Clear some chips here. we made it. Okay, so lastly, let's go ahead and check our hole depth and see how close we got. With our caliper here. Alright, well, I'm showing about 0.501, which is a little closer than I expected actually. 491, 503. So you can see this isn't super precise. Also, I'm not able to measure the very deepest portion of that hole, but this isn't the most accurate way to drill a hole to depth, but it'll get you pretty close anyway. Well, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more of these videos. Also, let me know if you have any ideas for things you'd like me to cover in future videos. I have several more tutorials planned and a few machining projects in mind. But until then, take care and happy machining.